Good morning, everyone. This is Randy with Stab Judgments. Look, I want to start out by saying there was supposed to be a guest lined up today. He was unable to make it. He just had a lot of stuff going on. Um, I do want to kind of say on a personal note, look, no matter who you are, no matter how big you are, none of that. If you say you're going to be somewhere, be there. If you're going to do something, do it. Um, you know, don't say you can do something if you can't. That sort of thing. I just think that kind of follow through and sticking by your word and being reliable are underrated qualities in today's society. And no matter how big this channel gets, no matter how whatever, no matter what happens, if I say I'm going to do something, I will be there. If I say I'm going to be somewhere, I'll be there. If I say I'm going to do something, I'll do it. Um, so I, I I just think that sort of stuff is important today. Um, at any rate, look, again, this is supposed to be a guest episode, so I'm a little bit on the fly. Bear with me. I think this is going to work out just fine, though. Um, what I want to start talking about is some pro day activity. Okay. Number one, Drew Aller had his pro day yesterday. Reports coming out said that he looked good, said that he looked healthy. He threw well. Um, this is a guy that was in the mix for, top 10 consideration preseason. Now, Penn State, they didn't have the season anybody expected them to have, but and he was injured for like half of it. And he didn't look, you know, particularly wonderful, I guess. Prior to that, um, there's a reason that he slid, right? But he I think that he's still an option for some teams as a quarterback. I in my first mock draft had him going 21 to the Steelers. Maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe he goes more in like the third round. Maybe still to the Steelers. We'll see. Look, the Steelers still don't have an option at quarterback. I read something recently where they actually aren't super excited about Will Howard. Aaron Rodgers is going to continue playing this string you along game because that's what he does. The last 5 years, he basically says every single year, "Hey, I'm not going to play games. I'm not going to stretch this out," and then he proceeds to do exactly that: plays games and stretches it out. The simple fact of the matter is, once you get to a certain age in the NFL, um, voluntary OTAs, workouts, things like that, they sound more and more exhausting. Tom Brady talked about it last year when Philip Rivers came back to play for the Colts, and he was like, anybody can come in and play 4 games, but it's all the practice, it's all the training camps and all that stuff ahead of time. That's what the older players don't like, and that's what they don't want a part of. And Rodgers won't have a signed contract until after a lot of that stuff is done, if he does, because he doesn't know. Not only does he not want to go to those things, but he doesn't want to answer questions about them. He doesn't want to sit there and say, "Hey, why aren't you at OTA? Why aren't you at voluntary OTAs?" Well, because they're voluntary, right? And he doesn't feel like going. But he doesn't want to answer those questions. So he didn't sign a contract last year until after voluntary OTAs. I wouldn't expect him to sign a contract this year until after voluntary OTAs. He may very well have a handshake deal with Mike McCarthy and the Steelers management. Um, but I don't think there's going to be an answer for the public as far as we have him signed, he's on the roster, he's ready to go until after voluntary OTAs, which is like May or something like that, right? Um, I think that Drew Aller could be a real option for them at the quarterback position in Pittsburgh. So again, his pro day was yesterday. He looked good. He looked really good. He looked really healthy. Um, Reports coming out were very positive about the whole thing. And I think it's something to keep an eye on for folks who are a fan of the draft in general. It's obviously not really Patriots related, other than he would be starting for a rival potentially. So um, something for us to all keep an eye on. Next, kind of bit of business, if you will. Uh, Carlos Lopez from Los Talks Pats. This is a kind of a bigger Patriots podcaster in the Patriots podcast community, if you will. Um, he is tweeting about Mike Washington following the Arkansas Pro Day. Now, apparently, the Patriots have shown extensive interest in this player. We knew that they met him at the combine. We have seen and now we see this here at the Pro Day, where at the Pro Day, they not only showed up for his workout, they not only showed up for the things he was doing, but they also pulled him aside and wanted to get a look at some other things. Okay. Um, Now at his pro day, he went ahead and ran a 6.913 cone and a 4.32 shuttle, um, which backed up what we saw from his combine, um, where he ran a 4.3340. And hold on, I'm pulling up the 10-yard split on that. I really should have had that information in front of me. My apologies. Um, a 4.3340 with a 1.51 split. He had a 39-inch vertical jump and a 10'8" broad jump there. Now this is a player. He's on his third team in college. Okay, he played for Buffalo for 3 years, one being a redshirt year. Then New Mexico State, where he led the team with rushing touchdowns, 8 rushing touchdowns. He played in 12 games, 4 starts. And then in 2025, he moved over to Arkansas, second team All SEC. He ranked 9th in the FBS with 6.4 yards per carry. He led the team with 1,070 rushing yards. That was, again, 6.4 per carry, and had 8 rushing touchdowns on top of that. So this is a player who, look, he's got excellent size. Okay, that's really kind of what's flying under the radar with the 4.33. Okay, a 4.33 is not incredibly rare for a running back. You want a running back to be fast. Just let's see, Travion Henderson's combine results from last year. He ran a 4.43. Okay, so Mike Washington's faster than Travion Henderson, who is explosive and fast himself. Let's see, combine results, 10-yard split for Travion. Let's see what that 10-yard split, 151 to 152 for Travion. So about the same 10-yard split for Travion as Mike Washington, but Mike Washington has better top end speed. So this is a player that we are in New England we're interested in, and that is interesting to me because they have done so much to build up the run game this offseason. It's been a clear priority. Okay, whether it's the signing of Julian Love to a 3-year $18 million contract as a blocking tight end, whether it's bringing in Reggie Gilliam, one of the top fullbacks in the league, whose quote when he was interviewed by local reporters and introduced was, "When you see someone's head pop, it's going to be because of me." Or whether it was bringing in the top guard option in the market in Elijah Vera Tucker, who's an excellent pass ball blocker, but also a great run blocker. All right. This is a team that is clearly focusing on the run game and trying to answer some of the problems that they had in short yardage, red zone, and scoring situations last year. Mike Washington Jr. would be a great answer to a lot of those problems. The question is, where are they thinking about taking him? Does he sneak into the first round? Do they pick him at 31? That seems a little rich for me. But sitting there and hoping he'll still be there at 63, also risky. So what's the answer? Do you trade back from 31? Do you trade up from 63? Do you reach and take him at 31? It's funny because they talked, Elliot Wolf was talking at the combine about draft position, and um, Taylor Kyles, I think it was saying, like, I was saying, he was talking to somebody and saying, how it's different to scout for pick 31 as opposed to last year when they had pick 4, and you knew only 3 players were going to be off the board. So you could kind of there was a pretty obvious pool of players that you were going to be able to pick from for your first pick. And the team, Elliot Wolf kind of made the point that, like, listen, last year we were picking at 4, sure, but we were also picking at 38 in the second round. And so that scouting process for 38 is very similar to 31. It's the same similar sort of range. Um, and so he comped that range, and then you think, well, they took Travion Henderson at 38. So 31 is not too early to take a running back for the Patriots. I'm really kind of beginning to wonder, are they thinking about taking Mike Washington Jr. in the first round? Again, option to trade back, perhaps. Maybe you want to trade back, and that's fine. That would be ideal, actually. But could they be thinking about taking Mike Washington Jr. in the first round? I think that's a very real option for the Patriots right now. Um, it's something that we're going to explore in mock drafts this week, next week, this week. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay. So, hold on. Excuse me. So again, this was supposed to be more of a pairing episode. So I was going to I had a whole plan of questions and prospects I was going to ask about, graphics setup, everything for it. Um, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through some of the questions I had about some of these players and kind of what I think about this. All right. So right now, coming off the Mike Washington Jr. conversation, where again, I think he's a very realistic option for the Patriots in round one. There are a number of other players, not necessarily just options for New England, but draft players who have a number of questions. Okay. And we're going to start that conversation off talking about J Rod out of Texas Tech. Okay. Jacob Rodriguez, linebacker out of Texas Tech, one of the most productive, um, talented linebackers in college football last year. He was an absolute turnover machine. Um, Fumbles, interceptions. I'm pulling up the exact numbers right now. Again, bear with me. It's kind of like last minute prep. Um, but at any rate, he was a turnover machine for Texas Tech last year. All right, he had 6 passes deflected, uh, 1 fumble return touchdown, 7 forced fumbles, 4 interceptions. That's all last year. Okay, 11 turnovers forced, 6 passes deflected, 2 fumbles recovered. By the way, 1 for a touchdown. No interception touchdowns, but he did get 41 yards off those 4 interceptions. He is a playmaker. Okay. And he was thought of as being far too small. He's listed at 6'1", 200 in college. But when he showed up at the combine, he actually measured in at like 6'1", 230, which is a very comparable size to CJ Allen. And that's a player that, nobody really has questions about his size, about his fit into the back end of the first round, any of that. Um, and Jacob Rodriguez compared very well size wise to CJ Allen. Now, slightly shorter arms, slightly smaller hands. Those are things that I will say. Uh, so it's a little bit, he is a little bit of a smaller guy, but incredibly productive. And on top of that, when he showed up at the combine, man, he ran. Okay. He worked those drills. He ran a 4 5 second 40-yard dash at the combine. I'm pulling up the rest of his numbers right now. Excuse me. 1.6 10-yard split, 38.5 vertical jump, 10'1" broad, a 6'9" three cone, and a 4.19 20-yard shuttle. Okay. He was at the top of the linebacker class across the board in everything that he did. Um, this is, again, and I'm looking here at his NFL.com profile. The first weakness they list is can be knocked around inside the box by size. All right. Again, a guy he was thought of as being undersized, thought of as being too small. I don't think that that's played out. I don't think that the questions, again, the question, it was similar to him and Dylan Thieneman are very similar prospects to me. Okay. They're both very productive on the field. Now, Jacob Rodriguez, a little bit older, a little bit more experienced. Thieneman, only 3 years, I believe, in two at Purdue, one at Oregon. But they both came into this process with the general thought amongst the scouting community of these are excellent football players, but are they athletes? Can they pair, um, you know, football IQ, productivity with the at least a baseline of athleticism to play within the NFL? All right. And we've seen questions about that with guys in the past. The one guy that really jumps to my mind immediately is Brian Branch. All right, Brian Branch, a few years ago, I thought he was a top 10 player in the class. I remember absolutely being in love with this prospect in ways similar that people today um, have Jacob Rodriguez as a top 5 to 10 prospect. And I do know people who have him as a top 10 prospect in this class. I know even more people who don't actually have him rated as a top 10 prospect, but think that at the end of the day, 3 to 5 years down the road, he's going to be one of the top 10 players in this class. And I don't know how you separate those things personally. But my point is that a few years ago, we saw Brian Branch show up to the combine and put up subpar numbers. He ran a 40 in the mid 4.5s. They just weren't particularly eye popping numbers for a safety. This year, we have guys that comp to him in terms of like value on the field, value to a team, football character, just being a football player. But they showed up to the combine and they put up those athleticism numbers. Okay. They learned from the Brian Branch saga, if you will, where he went second round, but he was immediately an impact player in the team. He immediately upgraded the Detroit Lions secondary and defense as a whole, and immediately had guys like me doing victory laps. Like, why did you not take him in the first round? J-Rod and Thieneman, they both showed up and they balled out at the combine. All right. J-Rod, I just read off his numbers. Thieneman's 40 was like in the mid 4.3s. He was great across the board as well. So I think these guys are guys that are, I mean, Thieneman's definitely going to be in the first round. Jacob Rodriguez, I think, also sneaks his way into the back of the first round. At least I wouldn't be surprised. I think he's probably a guy that you're going to see come off the board definitely in the top 50, maybe in the top 40, maybe in the top 30, but somewhere say 30 to 50. Jacob Rodriguez comes off the board and it makes a lot of sense. It makes the team very happy. He's an immediate contributor, immediate tone setter. He's going to be, captain type at maybe not year one as a rookie, maybe, who knows, but he's going to be that type of leader, that type of tone setter, that type of guy in the locker room that you simply want on your team. For me, we sum it up here in New England with 2 words. He's a Vrabel guy. Okay. That's it. That's all you got to say about this guy. Now moving on to the next guy, Caleb Banks here. Caleb Banks is a guy who has just eye-popping athleticism, eye-popping physical traits. There just aren't a lot of men on the planet that are built like this man. He's 6'6", 330 pounds, 35 plus inch arms, 11-inch hands. He's a massive force on the defensive line. I saw highlights of him when I was doing his tape study, particularly against Tennessee, where he just flattened 2 members of the line completely on his own. All right. The man is a beast. At the Senior Bowl, he showed up. He was throwing offensive line play. And I mean, literally throwing dudes off the ground. Nothing, their feet weren't touching, their hands, nothing was touching. For a moment, they were just, falling with style in Buzz Lightyear fashion. He's a physical presence. Okay. A mammoth of a man to deal with. But he has those lingering injury issues. Okay, he missed most of the year this year. He played very limited snaps in 2 games. Came back for the Senior Bowl to show that he, was physically ready to go and all of that sort of thing. But Yo, sorry, my cat's going nuts. Okay, sorry about that. Um, next, oh, sorry. The Caleb Banks injury issues they're very real issues. Okay. I seriously don't know why my cats can't just stop. Okay. The injury issues are very real. I swear to God, I'm going to have to change the time of this show because my cats cannot stop being ridiculously annoying at this time of the day. I don't know why. Um, the injury issues for Caleb Banks, they're very, very real. Okay. He missed most of the year last year, played very limited snaps, showed up the Senior Bowl, dominant. Okay. No sign of injury issues at the Senior Bowl for that week. Then he showed up at the combine. He showed out pretty well at the combine. All right. For a man his size, running just over a 5 second 40, putting up the numbers he did, very good. Then it came out that he pulled out of position drills. And the first rumors were that there were issues with his shoe. I heard one person say something to the effect of like his shoe was making him bleed. Um, and that was why I don't normally smoke on air, but here we are. Um, yeah, there was talk that his shoe was making him bleed, that it was tight, and immediately I said here on air, no, that sounds like BS to me. Okay, that sounds like a nonsense, like, oh, my shoe. No, that's not. There are continued foot issues because with big guys like this, foot and leg issues are fairly commonplace. And they aren't just something that like you fix and then you don't have them anymore. They're like back issues, right? You've never in your life met a guy who used to have back problems. I don't give a shit. I don't care how young he is. I don't care any of that. Once you have back problems, you just got them. Okay, you manage them for the rest of your life. It's about pain management. It's about preventative care, all that sort of stuff, right? And it's the same thing with foot issues and lower leg issues with big men like this. You see it in the NBA all the time. Those tall guys, 6'10", 6'11", 7-foot guys that just their bodies can't hold up to carrying that weight, to having that force. Just like for a big guy, as a big guy, I'll tell you this personally, walking downstairs, much worse than walking up. Okay, because you have all that force coming down on your feet, coming down on your ankles, coming down on your knees, coming down on your feet, and you continue having these problems, right? So these guys, they don't just stop having foot problems. Okay, and we saw it in New England recently with Christian Barmore, right? He missed an entire season. No, that wasn't foot problems, that was blood clots. But point is that you have these lingering issues that they push you down the draft board for a reason. All right. You take a guy in the top 30, you take a guy in the top 50, you want him to be available to you. You want him to be available to you. You want him to be playing. Okay. This guy is a very, very talented, but as the old saying goes, the greatest ability is availability. And if he's not going to be available, it's going to be tough to use a top 50 asset on a player like that, no matter what his physical skills are when he's healthy. Because again, the key words are when he's healthy. If he's not going to be, then that's going to be a problem. Now, this transitions very nicely into Jermon McCoy. Okay, Jermon McCoy is a player. He came into this season with a lot of hype. All right. Now, 2024 tape, absolutely magnificent. Just so good. All right. And we've seen players like Derek Stingley, for instance, who put up his freshman season just ridiculously good tape. And then he basically just sat back. and waited for the draft for 2 years. Um, and then he ended up going top 5. He's been great. He's one of the higher paid cornerbacks in the draft. He just signed a 3-year, 30 million-ish deal a few months back. So it's worked for players like this, but Jermon McCoy tore his ACL last January. Okay. Sat out the entire year. Now there was talk of, oh, well, he could have come back in the last couple games if he wanted to. I don't know about that. I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV. I don't even play one on Twitter. But what I do know is that players like Caleb Banks did come back. They did come back, even with limited snaps, just to show that physically they could get out there. Okay. The Senior Bowl came and went, no sign of Jermon McCoy whatsoever. All right. Now, he's not the type of player that would show up at the Senior Bowl had he been healthy all year, but he wasn't. It was the perfect opportunity to come out and show I still got it. Right. But no, we heard he was saving himself and trying to prepare for the combine and so forth. What was he preparing for, you ask? Well, he was preparing to skip the testing at the combine also, apparently. He didn't do anything. Nobody saw him do a single thing. I know guys who were at the combine who said they literally didn't even see him walk anywhere. Never saw his legs and feet in motion or in use. All right, so nobody's seen anything from this guy. The teams might have seen him walk into the interview room in Indianapolis, but nobody's seen him do anything physically on a field or any of that. So Jermon McCoy, from a top 10 lock, considered by many, throughout this season, because again, it's been well over a year since he tore his ACL. And so people just assumed he was going to show up at the combine, he was going to show out, and he was going to be a top 10 lock. He was going to show up at his pro day, he was going to show out and all that. But now he didn't show up at the combine. The pro day is coming up, and I'll just pull up a list of the pro days here. Let's see. The Tennessee Pro Day is scheduled for March 31st. That's in 12 days. If Jermon McCoy does not show up and do anything at the Tennessee Pro Day, I don't know that you can still take him with a first round pick. That's going to be a hot take. It is. But I personally, if I hadn't seen a guy move in any significant way in at least 16 months, and that's going to be the timeline by the time April and the draft come around, there's no way I could spend a first round pick on him. I just couldn't do it. Now, maybe one of these teams with multiple first round picks, and you kind of see one as, despite the fact they trade assets for it, you almost see them as found money, right? So there's the possibility that one of the 4 or 5 teams that there are right now with multiple first round picks say, listen, we can afford to take the risk on that guy in the first round, because if it pans out, great. Right. We saw Will Smith last year from the Arizona Cardinals fall precipitously. Again, he was another guy there was talk about him going top 10, top 15 pre-draft last year, but he had injury issues. He had issues throughout the pre-draft process. I believe he did run, and he ran a little slower too, and that didn't help him. But we saw him go to the Cardinals in the 3rd round this year, last year's draft, and then play this year. And he played very well. He was considered by most to be basically a steal. And, so it could be that sort of scenario for Jermon McCoy. Very well could be. It's just about what teams have an appetite for risk, and how much risk do they have an appetite for. So it's something to keep an eye on. In 12 days, Tennessee has their pro day. If Jermon McCoy does not run, if he doesn't show up, he'll show up, but if he doesn't show up on the field, if he doesn't do position drills, if he doesn't do any drills, if he doesn't do any sort of workout, this is a guy I think that could fall out of the first round and maybe deep into day 2. Again, similar to what we saw from Will Johnson last year. Monroe Freeling's the next guy on this list, and, I had intended to ask Jeremy about him because I kinda know, that was the guest that was gonna be on here, Jeremy. I kinda know a little bit about what Jeremy thinks about Monroe Freeling and so forth, um, and I know that I was one of the first guys that had Monroe Freeling mocked, early at number 6 to Cleveland. Now, Cleveland has since built out their line, right? At the time when I had him mocked to them, they did not have a single offensive lineman um, scheduled to or like on their roster for the 2026 season. All of their offensive linemen were going to be free agents. And at least two of them had out loud stated they had no interest in coming back to Cleveland. Um, so they had serious issues along the offensive line. Since then, they've filled in a lot of spots. Okay, Titus Howard, Wyatt Teller, Elton Jenkins. There's a left guard in there too that I'm forgetting. But point being is they've filled in a lot of spots in their offensive line. Matter of fact, they've filled in about 4 out of 5 spots there. The one spot they haven't filled in is the one spot that I think Monroe Freeling will play, and that's left tackle. I still think it's a very real possibility that Monroe Freeling goes in the top 10 to Cleveland. In fact, if I were going to write out a full first round mock draft today, that's where I would take him. But maybe not. There's some feeling that Monroe Freeling may not be ready right away. He might require some work. And if that's the case, how do you take him to a place that's going to need him to start day one? Are you able to kind of let him learn on the fly a little bit? Is that how you want to operate? Those are questions that Cleveland is going to have to answer one way or another. One way or another, they need a left tackle, though, and I don't see a lot of other options out there, whether it be in free agency, whether it be in the trade market, or whether it be in the draft, than Monroe Freeling. And I talked about this when I mocked him there at 6th overall initially. It's all about position scarcity. Okay, try to find yourself a left tackle in free agency. Try to find one in the draft. You can't do it. All right. And what also it tells me a little bit about their intentions is the fact that Rasheed Walker recently was on in free agency. He was a left tackle. He's a left tackle. He's an average left tackle. He's an offensive tackle. He's an average offensive tackle. He's not great. Okay. But he was in free agency and he was one of the last players to sign. He wasn't part of that initial rush, right? He was looking for his next home for a few days. And he ended up signing a 1-year, $10 million deal with the Panthers. Now, the Panthers, I get it because Ike Ekwonu's injured. They need a tackle. They need a guy who can play, at least to open the season, maybe the first half, maybe the full season. We'll see how it goes. But my point is that if you needed a left tackle and you felt like you needed a left tackle and you felt like you didn't have your answer coming or down the road or whatever it may be, why wouldn't you throw 10 million at Rasheed Walker? That is a very manageable contract amount, right? We saw the Titans sign left tackle what's his name? Dan Moore last year to a 4-year, $82 million deal. It said over 20 million AAV. Okay, that's average annual value. And he is probably about the same tier of player that Rasheed Walker is. So why wouldn't you bring in someone like Rasheed Walker? Well, maybe you've got plans to fill that spot in the draft. Maybe you've got plans to pick Monroe Freeling at 6. I don't know. We'll know more next month, about 1 month from today. All right, April 23rd next month, the draft will start, and we'll know very soon if Monroe Freeling is going to be the left tackle of the future of the Cleveland Browns. Now, moving on, our Mason Thomas. I've talked about him a lot this week. I've talked about him with a couple different analysts, and I'll continue talking about him. All right. And that's because he did have a meeting set up, combine meeting rather, with the Patriots. They did get into why am I not? I had stuff saved yesterday and I can't find it now. Um, but he did have a contract with a meeting with the Patriots rather. Uh 30 meeting. Where is this? Oh wait. I think I know where it is. No, that's not it. That's not it. Okay. All right. All right. I'm not finding what I'm looking for. Sorry. Um Look, he did have a meeting with the Patriots. Um and he is oh, this is frustrating. Here we go. Um here we go. All right. Um He has the 30 visit lined up. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the concept of, the pre-draft process and how it plays out, there are a number of opportunities for teams to meet with players. The All-Star games, the pro days, the combine, but then also they have the opportunity to bring in 20 players. Wait, 20 players to 30. It might be 30 players. Sorry. That's why they call them 30 visits. 30 players to the combine, to the facility, rather. They'll invite them right on up to New England. They'll show them around the facility. They'll spend several hours with these players, often their overnight visits. Um, they'll wine and dine top prospects, show them off. Sometimes you'll get teams with the top 5 pick or whatever, and they're bringing guys in, and they're bringing in old players and legends in the program and guys like that. They'll bring in the owners, they'll bring in GMs, other players on the team, stuff like that. Try and evaluate this guy, try and see how he's going to fit into the culture, this sort of thing, right? Um, Now, our Mason Thomas is a guy that they brought in, and you see right below that, Romello Height is a guy they also brought in. Um, these are guys that I think are very interesting, um, because the range that they are possibly going to be drafted in, which is probably the second round. Um, some people have our Mason Thomas to the Patriots in the first round, and I don't think that that's proper value. Personally, I think that the value for the edge class is in the second round. Our Mason Thomas, Romello Height, that's a little early for Romello Height, in my opinion, given his age, given his size limitations, given his athletic limitations, even for a smaller player. Um, but you do see a common theme throughout some of these players that they are meeting with, right? You see the 30 visits here. These are kind of the most advanced visits. Our Mason Thomas, Romello Height, both undersized edges. You see the pro days here. Grayson Halton, undersized D tackle. Haynes King was an interesting addition to me. Um, Travis Burke, gigantic offensive tackle. Then you see the combine visits. These are the combine visits that have been reported. Now, Jalen Farmer, he's a guy that we've talked about. Very fast, good run blocking, offensive guard. Probably a guy that you'd end up taking in like round 3, round 4. I don't think obviously he's not going to start unless AVT gets hurt or something like that. But looking down this list again, Cassius Howell, undersized, right? Akeem Mesidor, older guy, probably a round 1 target. Not undersized, good size. Okay, I actually stand corrected on his size too. My impression was that he was like 275 to 285, and he was going to come into the combine. Well, I mean, just that was his playing weight, that he was a bigger defensive end. And he actually came to the combine, I think, 263. So right in the range that we like guys at, right about, a little bit heavier on the range that we like guys at, but I think he comps well to a Draymond Jones, um, just in terms of size profile, um, and being able to kind of trim down to the mid 260s. I was actually watching a episode yesterday, with Dane Brugler, who's one of the more well-known, draft nicks, if you will, and, he said he said in his notes, he wrote down Mesidor plays like a werewolf. He's like, "I don't even know what that means. That's just what I wrote down." And, he just meant that, like, would he went on to say that he was talking about kind of the intensity he plays with, and, he plays with hair on fire. What he was doing was actually making a list of, the 10 dogs of the draft, and, I thought it was interesting, Mesidor was on there. He was in at 4. If you actually want the list right here, I wrote it down. Number 1 was Ruben Bain Jr. out of Miami. He's gonna be way too early for a Patriots pick. Number 2, Mekhi Lemon, wide receiver out of USC. He just said he played with no fear. Number 3, Keontae Scott, defensive back out of Miami. Another guy who's about 25-ish, probably gonna be around 2 to 3 target for folks. I don't think he's the guy that we would aim for just because we kinda have those positions situated, right? Um, Number 4, he had Akeem Mesidor, like I just said. He said he plays angry and plays like a werewolf, which I thought was hilarious. Number 5, D'Angelo Pons, undersized cornerback, not a guy that we could really fit into our system, I don't think. I comp him to Marcus Jones, and while I love Marcus Jones, there are 11 players on the field, and only one of them can be 5'8", and right now, for us, that's Marcus Jones. Number 6, he has Kenyon Sadiq. And I thought that was an incredibly interesting addition. Actually, first thought that popped in my mind was, man, what'd the agent give you to put him on that list? Because early in the season, you may or may not remember, Todd McShay publicly called out Kenyon Sadiq's effort, said that the word in the building was that, while he shows up on Saturday, the effort in practice, the effort in the facility, the focus, all that sort of thing was not there. And that it was disappointing to people on the team. So I found it interesting that he would be included on this. He specifically talked about his run blocking early in the year, and I just thought that contradicted the reports that we had heard earlier on in the year. Um, and so I thought he was an interesting addition for a name on this list of top 10 dogs of the draft. Number 7, Omar Cooper Jr., wide receiver out of Indiana. This is a guy that a lot of people mock to the Patriots if he's still on the board there. He is one of the best yards after catch receivers in the country in this class. Um, Not an overly big guy, something like 5'11", 6 foot, 190 pounds, in that range. But he shows up in clutch moments, big moments. A lot of people are going to remember that clutch grab he made to win the game against Penn State in the back of the end zone. I mean, it was an amazing just show of body control, focus, hands. He went up in the back of the end zone, ended up being able to grab it with one hand, keeping his foot in bounds when he came down it was practically a circus trick. There was, if you saw that play, you won't forget it. Excellent player, excellent player. I'm not sure he'll be there for us, and I'm additionally not sure that that's what we need right now. Again, I need to remind people this is not about collecting talent. This is about building a team. Okay. And that starts in each room. Okay. And by that, I mean position grouping, right? You can't have 5 wide receivers that do the same thing. It's similar to building a basketball team. Okay. Now basketball was kind of my first love. And I covered it professionally for a couple of years back in 2010, 2011, when I covered the Celtics and the Friars. That was back in the Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce, Ray Allen days. Good times. Here's the point. If you're building a basketball team, you don't have 5 centers. You also don't have 5 point guards. Doesn't matter how good they are, right? Shaq is indebatably a top 5 center of all time. But if you had a team with 5 Shaqs on it, you would get blown out. All right. So you're building a room. Okay. And this is with each position, right? You don't want tons of overlap in skills. You don't want tons of overlap in play style, the game that they bring to the table, if you will, right? You need the jitterbug slot weapon type, like the Pop Douglas, like the Efton Chisholm, right? You need the big wide receiver that can go deep down the field. I mean, right now you're talking about maybe a Mac Hollins and Kayshon Boutte being forced into that role because we really don't have anybody else in that role. What we call it here in New England is the sacrificial X, and this is kind of a guy who can go deep, who can be a threat deep, but who's also not gonna demand the ball all the time, right? I think of, my favorite kinda sacrificial X of, New England's, dominant run for 20 years there was Chris Hogan. That seemed like that's a very good, example of that. Now, not everybody works in that role, and it's not just simply about getting out there and running fast and far in one direction. We saw that when Joey Galloway came here, and he wasn't what we needed at that position, and he didn't do very well here. So, um, where was I going with that? Point being is that you're building out a room, okay, and you don't need the same type of player over and over and over again in that room. So that's why, there are a number of wide receiver prospects in this class that I'm just simply not interested in. Now, earlier on, I talked about the edge kind of value being in round two, and I believe that. Um, Now, here are a number of players right here that are probably going to be available in that class. Um, and I'm just double checking something here we talked about the other day, and it's simply so unbelievable to me that I just had to look it up again. Where Gabe Akis did not work out at the Illinois Pro Day on March 12th. He also did not work out at the combine. I don't know of any medical issues surrounding Gabe Backus, but I'll tell you what. Next week, I have Jimmy Lau MD. Now he's a Detroit Lions podcaster, a doctor. He kind of specializes in talking about medical issues, medical red flags, etc., from prospects throughout the pre-draft process. And we're going to talk about some of these players, and Gabe Backus is going to come up in that conversation because I need to know why he's not doing anything until his own individual pro day. Is he that worried about his athleticism? Is he struggling with an injury? What's going on with that? This is a guy that I have questions about. He has excellent productivity. I talked about him earlier in the week. Watching his film was exciting to me. Okay, and I talked about him with Peter yesterday. Actually, um, I watched the film I watched of him specifically most recently was the Northwestern game against Caleb Tiernan. That's because Tiernan was probably the best tackle prospect that he lined up against this year, and I knew that he beat him. Um, I believe he had 2 sacks in that game. He had a number of tackles and another number of other impact plays, but it was a really good game to see, kind of what he was all about, okay? This is a guy, he plays with his hand up, he plays with his hand down. Incredibly, uh he's got a lot of burst, okay, and he's got a lot of, like, twitch to him, okay, and when he plays, I was talking about it with Peter yesterday, you'll see him a lot of times where he's at the line and he's, like, rocking back and forth. He's, like, so antsy to get off, and sometimes he'll rock so far forward that he ends up with a hand on the ground inadvertently, and then he springs off from that, and he actually gets a lot better get off with the hand on the ground. Hey, Mike, good to see you, man. Sorry I didn't see that until just now, but, thank you. Thank you. Impromptu solo show today. So doing my best, winging it a little bit here. Um, but yeah, Gabe Akis is a guy that I'm incredibly interested in. I don't think that some of these guys you hear about or you read about, or you look at like Malachi Lawrence, right? Who is practically a liability in the run game, just brings you nothing in run defense. Gabe Akis is not like that. Actually particularly liked the way that when he was, hands on with an offensive tackle at the line, he kept his eye on the ball and is able to disengage from that tackle and then go chase the ball, whether it be a running back, whether it be a screen pass, whatever. This guy, he's able to get off those blocks. The block shedding is the important in the run game, in the run defense game, because you cannot tackle a guy if another guy's got you hung up. Um, and I thought Gabe Backus brought that to his game. He also is obviously a threat in pass rush. 11 sacks last year, and I think 20 in his career. We're going to keep an eye on that individual pro day. I'm not even sure when it's scheduled at. Let's see, pre-draft workout. Let's see if I pre-draft workout. Pre-draft workout. Yeah, it didn't happen. All right. Well, you know what? We're going to keep an eye on that. I will let you know as soon as I know when Gabe Backus is going to work out, because I think he's a very legitimate target for this team in the second round. You'll see next to him a new name that's relatively new to this program, this show, and that's Jashawn Barham. All right. He is a linebacker / edge prospect out of Michigan. He had his pro day recently, and he looked very good at it. That was the reporting coming out of that. Now, at the combine, he ran a 4.64 40. Let's see, where is he? Why am I not Bishop Barham Pro Day? All right. Well, anyway, at the combine, he ran a 4.64 40, which is the 93rd percentile for his position, and had a 10'3" broad jump. He measured in at 6'3.5", 240 pounds, and he's considered kind of a versatile defender that's probably going to be a 3-4 outside linebacker, pass rusher, edge, an edge linebacker kind of type, if you will. Probably again in that second round range. A lot of people have this guy projected to the Bills. I know a lot of Bills fans that are big fans of him, that think that he would fit in well on their defense, which it makes it a bigger reason for me to think we should take him, make sure he doesn't. He played a lot of off-ball linebacker in college. So the transition to edge in the pros is 100% projection. All right. It's just looking at that kind of prototypical size, length, strength blend, looking at his play style and saying, I think this guy could probably slot in at the edge position here. A lot of projection. There's a lot of, wonder about that. I was certain they had their pro day recently, and the reports were, okay. So March 20th, the reports were about the combine. He looked good at the combine. He did look good at the combine. March 20th is tomorrow. University of Michigan will have their pro day tomorrow. 8 former Wolverines were expected to participate. Well, they participated in the combine. They are number of them slated to participate in the pro day. I have the full list loading up right now. Again, bear with me. Yeah, Barham, one of them. Rayshon Benny on the D line. Caleb Anderson, a D back. Max Brederson. Nobody else we're really particularly super interested in. Marlon Klein is a tight end. He's a guy who's like super athletic, didn't test at the combine, which was weird. Definitely going to test there. Derek Moore. Now, that's another guy that we've talked about. He's here on this graphic right here in front of you, 6'4", 255, a little bit of smaller hands, not a big deal at the edge position, but something that I keep an eye on. We saw him at the Senior Bowl, and that's where he really made his mark, right? He absolutely demolished Markel Bell, 6'9", 370-pound offensive tackle who Derek Moore just flattened like he had been hit by a truck. The speed to power on Derek Moore is real. The pass rush moves are not. He needs to work on some polish in his pass rush game. He's got to add some tools to the bag, if you will. But he does have the strength, the speed, the power, the velocity, if you will, to make an impact on the defensive line. Malachi Lawrence, we've talked about extensively on this program. Excellent pass rusher, excellent pass rush moves. A lot of them twitchy, quick, fast, long, all the things you want. Absolutely a liability in the run defense game. But, is that a big deal? Not in some systems and not in some places. Anthony Lucas, we've talked about in the past. I am out on him currently. Look, number one, no production whatsoever, really, at the college level. 3 total sacks. One of them came against Nebraska. Dylan Raiola just held onto the ball forever. It was like he was almost hard. I almost sacked Dylan Raiola, and I didn't even watch the game till a month later. But Anthony Lucas sacked. Oh, hi. What's up, buddy? Oh, sorry, cats. Anthony Lucas sacked him, and then the other 2 sacks came against Georgia Southern, their backup left tackle in game 1 of the year. If you know anything about college ball, game 1 is when you line up a punching bag and you just hit it. And that punching bag, they had to wait. I mean, look, they were overwhelming the Georgia Southern offensive line early in the game. Don't get me wrong. But it wasn't until the backup left tackle came in that Anthony Lucas, there's Loki, say hi. It wasn't until the backup left tackle came in that Anthony Lucas was actually able to get to the quarterback. And again, only 3 sacks your entire college career, not just that year, but your entire college career, despite, I think it was 50 starts. Another game that I watched of his tape was against Oregon. Oregon was one of the better teams that USC played last year. I intend to watch the Notre Dame tape a little bit more closely as well. I've watched it in the past for the sake of watching Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane. But I really intend to focus on Anthony Lucas the next go around. But I watched the Oregon tape, and I'm telling you, Jamari Johnson, their tight end, he was their second tight end last year. I think he might actually be better than Kenyon Sadiq. He'll probably be in next year's draft class. I watched him throw Anthony Lucas to the ground, pancake him. And then I watched him on the very next play, again, individually, just handle this kid. And at that point in time, it was like, listen, if a tight end can manhandle you like that, if a tight end can absolutely stop you in your tracks, I'm not interested in you as a pass rusher at the NFL level. He came in at 256, about 20 to 30 pounds lighter than I thought he might be. I'm not sure what's going on with him, but I am pretty sure he's going to be a day 3 pick at best. Third round receiver options. Bryce Lance is a guy we've talked about jumping up in level of competition from North Dakota State University to the NFL is going to be a big jump despite his physical tools. He also dodged competition by not showing up the Shrine Bowl. I don't know why that is. But again, it looks like he's scared of competition. He stayed at North Dakota State in a lower division his entire career. In the day and age of NIL money, right? In the day and age of, if you look like you got promised, someone will pay you a whole bunch of money to go play in a competitive conference. This guy decided to stay in an uncompetitive conference. This guy decided to dodge the Shrine Bowl. I think he's a workout warrior. I think he's a guy who, when he gets on the football field, is going to be very, very overwhelmed. Look, he's an option for me because of his physical tools, but he's a distant 5th, maybe even 6th. Malachi Fields, Jacoby Lane, pictured here. These are guys we've talked about on this channel at times. Lane. Now, Dane Brugler himself was involved in a conversation where I brought up Jacoby Lane and said I think he'd be an excellent addition to this Patriots team. And Dane Brugler said, I don't think he's a Mike Vrabel guy. That was interesting to me. That's revealing to me. It doesn't take him off my board because I don't know that. And I don't know how the team feels about him. But what I do know is that, again, Brugler said what Brugler said, and that's on him. Malachi Fields does seem like a Mike Vrabel guy to me. Okay, he's a guy who high effort, run blocking, not the best physical tools in terms of like speed and burst, but ball tracking. We saw that at the Senior Bowl. He made the play of the week on like a 60-yard bomb from Taylon Green. The ball tracking, the contested catch, all that stuff's very real, very good. The Patriots could jump on that in the third round easily. Um, Now, looking at these day three interior offensive linemen, Jalen Farmer, he's a guy we've talked about extensively, right? We had seen that he was a guy that they met with at the NFL scouting combine there. He's a guy projected probably early day three, maybe even around three. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked to see that. Inez Cooper, I've talked about just due to the Miami connections throughout the Patriots scouting department, whether it be AJ Highsmith, his dad, Alonzo Highsmith, number of players, some of the coaching staff has experience in Miami. There are a lot of very close ties to Miami throughout the program. Inez Cooper, to me, he looks like he could very well be the next Mike Onwenu. I think you draft him in the 6th round if he's there, sit him behind Onwenu for a year or two, and then let him step right into that spot. I think Jaden Roberts is another guy that could potentially take over that spot and play back up to Onwenu for a couple of years and then end up there. Good run blocker. You see that physique on that man. It's absurd. All right, he's like 6'5", 337 with like 0% body fat or something stupid like that. It's not 0, obviously, because I don't think that's physically possible, but it's something like 6% body fat. I remember, I remember seeing the it was something like he had 287 pounds of lean muscle. That's ridiculous. That's more than most people weigh. Um, just an absolute athletic specimen. Um, so listen, tomorrow I've got a guy coming on. His name's Accidental Zen on Twitter. I cannot for the life of me remember what his real name is, but we'll figure it out tomorrow morning. Um, I know he's a Steelers fan, and he's been on here before. We've talked before. If you know me, you know that my superpower is forgetting names. It's really kind of amazing how quickly I can forget somebody's name. Um, I've got a number of guests lined up for next week as well. If I pull up my schedule here, here we go. Let's see. Yeah, Monday's open though, and what we're going to do on Monday, I've been thinking about is I'm going to spend the weekend looking through the pre-draft visits from last year, comparing them to the draft picks from last year, and then looking through the pre-draft visits that have been reported so far for the Patriots this year. And we're going to really break down how important it is for the Patriots to get hands and eyes and whatever on a prospect before they draft him. All right. I can tell you right off the top of my head right now that 2 of the first 3 picks last year had pre-draft meetings with the Patriots. 3 of the first 5 picks. 2 of the first 5 picks, and I think 5 overall, something like that. But we're going to break down the depth of it. Like there are different stages where you can show interest. Okay, there are at the All-Star games, like the Hula Bowl and stuff. You're meeting guys that you may never pick, that may never get picked. That might be selling you your insurance next year. And then combine visits, pro day visits, 30 visits, etc. So we're going to take all the reported information from last year, plug it in with the players that we drafted. Then we're going to look at the reported information from this year and take a look at some of the guys that they might be interested in, because sometimes you'll see, oh, we've had 2 or 3 visits with this guy. We must be wanting to draft him. And then you go back last year and you realize, no, there were actually a number of guys that they had 2 or 3 visits last year, and they didn't draft them when they had the opportunity. And there were guys that we thought slid. There were guys that we thought fell. Look, not all visits are good visits, right? Not all visits are confirming visits. Sometimes you visit and you find out a guy's not a guy that you like. Um, so just the simple like having the visit, not as important as some people might play it out to be. Um, and so I think there's something to be learned by looking at the two lists, looking at what they've done this year, and kind of trying to project that forward and see what they might do next year. So, listen, guys, I want to thank everybody for bearing with me. Again, this was kind of an on the fly episode. I all the players' names are taking space. Well, like that, you meant? I had a bunch of pictures in here. Anyway, look, thank you for putting up for hanging out with me for this episode. This is a little impromptu on the fly solo episode. Um, was not remembering. Oh, right, yeah, yes, dude. It's not even just guest names; it's people's names. I introduced myself to a guy the other day, and 5 minutes later, I was like, "By the way, what's your name again?" But it's what it is a professional hazard. Okay. It's from doing years and years of security a night where hundreds and hundreds of people introduce themselves to you and dozens of people stand there and tell you their entire life story and all of this. And you don't care about any of it. You just want to do your job and get home in one piece. And so you just kind of shake your head and nod your head and pretend you're listening and you're never actually listening. And it just kind of it's a professional hazard. That's that's what I write it off as. And actually, that's what the guy whose name I forgot the other day, who was also security, and I we were talking about it, laughing about it. He said same thing. It's you meet hundreds of people a night, you just can't remember them all, and eventually you just stop even trying. So, listen again. Thanks for tuning in the program today, guys. Hopefully I brought you some interesting information. Hopefully I know there was some new stuff in there, some new names in there, whether it be Jermod McCoy, Caleb Banks, um, Jay Sean Barham, uh, guys like that. Inez Cooper, I haven't talked about too much yet. We've got some good stuff here. Hopefully, we'll get today's guest rescheduled for a time in the future. And Monday, we're going to sit down. We're going to talk about the importance of pre draft meetings, what they mean when you see that, hey, they've lined up a 30 visit, they met at a pro day with this guy, that sort of thing. Okay. This is Snap Judgments. We'll be coming back to you tomorrow morning. In the meanwhile, guys, please like, share, subscribe. We are up to 55 subscribers now. 55! Just last week, we were fighting for 50, and we got our 50th on Friday. In under a week, we're up to 55. I am so happy and proud about that. So Cody has come over to visit too. And I live in a petting zoo. Um, with all animals who feel like they need attention 24/7, and they do, and they are adorable animals. Let me see if I can get him to come up. Cody, come here. Up, up, come on, up. Cody, up, up, up. Cody, up. There he is. Cody's made an appearance on the show. I know. You're so excited. All right. Anyway, yes, you do only remember the problem children. 100%. That's 100% accurate. Hey, the best shows can be done on the fly sometimes, and it doesn't hurt that both Cody and Loki made an appearance. Okay, so they bring the cuteness level to the show, and we appreciate that, puppy. We really do. All right. Guys, I'll be back tomorrow. Please like, share, subscribe. 55 subscribers and climbing. We want to hit that 100 mark by the draft. It gives me 5 weeks to add another 45. All right. This was a good week adding 5, but it's not quite enough. We got to go 9 a week. All right. 9 a week for the next 5 weeks, and we can get to 100 subs. That would be a party. All right, guys. Have a great day. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks again so much.